Hello everybody. For today's content, I thought I would do something a little bit different and just do a quick run through of some of the main books that I really like as references when it comes to the general topic of fairies, sort of in the wider Celtic milieu. As you can see behind me, I'm pretty fond of books, although my bookshelf is super messy at the moment. I'm actually in the middle of working on a new manuscript, and this is what tends to happen when I'm writing. Yeah, sorry about that. I apologize to bibliophiles everywhere for the current state of my bookshelf. But I thought, since I've been doing these videos and I reference a lot of things as I'm doing them and taking on all these different subjects, that it might be helpful to just do a quick run through of some of the resources that I'm probably going to often be recommending or at least touching on in some of the videos. Now, I do want to emphasize at the start that my main preferred references are not necessarily books. I do really encourage people to connect with the living cultures in the existing Celtic nations. In the existing Celtic nations. There are a lot of these traditional beliefs that are still very vibrant and very present if you just take the time to talk to people and get to know people who still believe these things. If that's not an option for whatever reason, or you're not comfortable doing that, there are resources on YouTube, such as Michael Fortune. He has a YouTube channel. He goes throughout Ireland and he collects videos, video interviews of people talking about different things they remember, generally from their childhood, folklore, just bits of stories, bits of beliefs. It's really fascinating material, and it is really representative of the living cultural beliefs, which is important to have an understanding of if this is a subject that interests you. You have to have a respect for the living beliefs and an understanding that these are not just things that were collected in books 100 or 200 years ago. These are actually still living, viable beliefs and practices. So Michael Fortune's a big one that I tend to recommend. I have also mentioned in at least one of the other videos the Duchas.ie site, DUCHAS.ie, which is the collection of folklore that you can find online. That at this point is a little bit older. Most of the stories date from about 100 to 80 years ago. But it is a wonderful and very valuable collection of folklore material, and a lot of it does touch on fairy beliefs. So another main reason as well that I really love that site is that there's no filter on it. It is literally just the stories as they were collected. There's no attempt by folklorists or scholars to interpret them or add anything to them. It is just the stories as they were collected, which is enormously valuable. So, those would be my real main recommendations for what to look at. But that all aside, getting into books, we have Elf Queens and Holy Friars by Richard Firth Green. This is an academic text that came out fairly recently. I want to say last year or the year before. It's University of Pennsylvania Press. It really focuses a lot on the medieval and early modern beliefs relating to the fair folk, specifically more in like England, which is really cool because it can be hard to find that sort of material. Not exclusively England, but it does have a lot of that, which is a little harder to find sometimes. And it also takes a really interesting look on specifically the sort of intermingling and synchrony that occurred between the Christian beliefs and material and the fairy beliefs and fairy faith. So this is a big one that I recommend. It's got a lot of fascinating things in it, particularly looks at the world of fairy and the other world and beliefs relating to that and how they changed and were potentially shaped and influenced by, shall we say, foreign cosmology coming in. So that's one that I'm very fond of. An author you will hear me talking about constantly, Catherine Briggs. This particular one is a dictionary of fairies. She has quite a few books. Many of them are out of print now, but you can still get them used. This is one of my personal favorites, but anything by her is a wonderful resource. Highly, highly recommend. I don't 100% agree with everything she has to say when it comes to interpretation. She definitely had a very specific viewpoint when she was looking at the material, but the work she did collecting the different folklore and different beliefs and practices relating to fairies throughout the mid and into the last quarter of the 20th century is just, it's a fabulous resource. So you will often hear me talking about Catherine Briggs. She's like one of my personal heroes. I love her. Another one that you'll see me referencing a lot of work by is Claude Lecoteau. This particular book is Demons and Spirits of the Land, Ancestral Lore and Practices. I haven't yet read anything by him that I didn't like. I will say that his book on household spirits focuses a lot more on the Germanic material than I was expecting, but generally speaking, anything by Lecoteau is going to be a good read. I will say also all of his books are originally written in French, and then later translated into English, so English speakers were kind of getting this later after it's already been out in French for a while. And the other difficulty with that is that a lot of what he references are books that are only available in French. If you speak French, this is awesome, and I highly recommend tracking down the different sources that he references and reading them as well. One day, eventually, I might take the time and learn French just so I can read some of his sources. But he writes a lot specifically about the continental material, Western European continental, focusing on fairy lore and beliefs, and it's very good material to dig into. He has a book on the Wild Hunt. He has a book about witches, werewolves, and fairies. He's got quite a lot out there. He has a new one that just came out. I have not gotten that one yet, about elves and dwarves. Looking forward to that. This is another one that I'm very fond of, Scottish Fairy Beliefs. This is by Lizanne Henderson and Edward Cowan. Henderson also has a dissertation that I highly recommend. You can find it online sometimes, or you can order it through ProQuest. I like this one particularly because it focuses on the Scottish material, which again, you can't always find things necessarily focused just on that. It also discusses a lot of the connection between witches and fairies. It touches on the ballad material. It's just got a lot in it for not a relatively thick book. It has a lot of material in it. It's definitely worth checking out if this is a subject that interests you. A book that I know I have mentioned more than once in my videos, The Good People, New Fairy Lore Essays, edited by Narvaez, came out in 1991, so it is sadly already getting a bit dated at this point. It features a variety of different essays by many well-known people in the field of folklore, and some of them, like Lysat, also have other books that I would recommend. Her dissertation on banshees, Irish death messengers, was printed later as a book. can't recommend that one enough. Absolutely fascinating material. She has an article in here, as well as many other very, very good authors. I shouldn't say authors, very, very good folklorists. I don't, as usual, any anthology, I'm not going to agree 100% with everything that is in this book. There are a couple in particular that get a lot more skeptical side-eye from me than others, but it is a really good resource. It has a lot of anecdotal material in it. It has a variety of different material from different Celtic countries, including the Welsh, which can be another one that can occasionally be hard to find things on. So, highly recommend this one. I know I'm trying to go through this fairly quick because I'm getting really bad at keeping these videos short. Another one I know I've mentioned repeatedly, The Fairy Faith in Celtic Countries by Evan Wentz. This one, of course, came out in 1911, so it is very dated at this point. It was also right at that tail end of the Victorian period where it does have that scholarship in it that is super sketchy, and you just have to be really cautious. The anecdotal material is wonderful. It's a treasure trove for late 19th, early 20th century fairy beliefs. It's really invaluable for that. But just be super careful when you're getting into the more academic parts of the book, where the different contributors are giving their personal opinions. Some of those are really wacky, which I've already talked about in other videos, so I'm not going to rant about it here. Speaking of personal opinions, though, Joshua Cutchin, A Trojan Feast, the food and drink offerings of aliens, fairies, and Sasquatch. I realize it's a very interesting subtitle, but highly recommend this book. He touches really eloquently on the way that sort of modern beliefs about aliens and alien encounters, about cryptids, including Sasquatch, and older fairy beliefs all have some very intriguing common themes. There's another book called Passport to Mongolia. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that final part of that title. But on a similar topic, I'd also recommend that one. It's still up on my bookshelf, though, because I have way too many books down here already to get through. But I would definitely recommend this book if you're more interested in the modern interpretations of fairies and the potential overlap between fairies and UFO lore, which is definitely a thing. There's various opinions about what direction that overlap goes in, but this is a very good book on the subject. So definitely recommend that one. My other super favorite author, Cunning Folk and Familiar Spirits, Shamanistic Visionary Traditions and Early Modern British Witchcraft and Magic by Emma Wilby. Anything by Emma Wilby, I will recommend. The Visions of Isabel Gowdy is another super excellent book. Check it out if you are not familiar with it. But this book is just really, really wonderful book. It was put out by Sussex Academic Press. It does focus a lot on Scottish and English fairy lore and witchcraft material from the early modern period, the way those two things intertwined, the way they can sometimes be connected to potentially older paganism, the way they were often confused with more diabolic and demonic practices. It's got so much in it, and it really is invaluable for anyone who finds any of these topics interesting. It is a bit of a dry read, but it is worth getting through if it interests you. It has so much in it that can be used and applied even in modern beliefs and practices, although it is mostly looking at the early modern aspects. Don't let the dry academic stuff keep you from getting into it. These two I want to mention together. We have The Secret Commonwealth of Elves, Fauns, and Fairies by Reverend Robert Kirk and Andrew Lang. It was actually written, allegedly, by Kirk during his lifetime, which was during the 17th century. And then the manuscript was prepared and published by Andrew Lang in the 19th century. So there's a lot of confusion sometimes about this particular book. I highly recommend, though, if this interests you, getting The Secret Commonwealth and the Fairy Belief Complex by Brian Walsh. I will say up front, if you do not have a good, I don't know how exactly to describe it, I don't want to say ability exactly, but if you have a difficulty reading older typesets, or if you are not particularly good with dialects, or have no familiarity with Scots, which is a language found in the lowland region of Scotland, you are going to have a hard time with this book. It was written, you can find it because it is in the public domain, you can find it free online. It was written in the 17th century, so the form even of English that was used at that point is not what we have today as modern English. And there are points in here where Reverend Robert Kirk is also using terms that would be found more in Scots, and occasionally even Gaelic, Scottish Gaelic. So it can be a bit difficult for people that are not really good with all of those things. It's a very, very short book, but it has a huge amount of extremely valuable material in it, particularly relating to the beliefs at that time in that specific area. So highly, highly recommend it, but you are going to get a lot more out of it if you can read it easily, which is why I recommend this book. What Brian Walsh did, first of all, was to make the language a lot easier to read, which is enormously helpful for modern English speakers. And then he also has what effectively is a dissertation on Kirk's material. So it's sort of two purposes. It's an easier version of The Secret Commonwealth to read, but it also includes a very thorough and in-depth discussion of The Secret Commonwealth itself, both of Reverend Kirk and his life, and also all of the material that's going to be found in The Secret Commonwealth. It puts it into context, discusses that context in depth, and then also discusses all of the material that's going to be found in The Secret Commonwealth in a way that helps really explain it and give it a lot more depth than just reading The Secret Commonwealth by itself. So, highly, highly recommend getting this. There is another book with a very similar title out there that I do not recommend. It's actually a work of fiction, but a lot of people get confused and think that it's nonfiction, and those are the two Secret Commonwealth books that I recommend. There's also this one, Elves in Anglo-Saxon England by Alaric Hall. Hall is another author who I really recommend all of his work. Much like Wilby, a bit dry, very scholarly to try to get through. So you have to have a passionate love of footnotes to really get a lot out of Hall's work. We actually don't have a lot of pre-Christian material about fairy beliefs. Really in most of the assorted Celtic or related cultures. unless you want to get into the Roman and Greek and the more Mediterranean end of things. So looking into the Anglo-Saxon, although we're still sort of bordering into that, slightly Christian-ish era, but that's really some of the closest material we can get to the very, very early beliefs relating to fairies and elves. So Alaric Hall's material is super useful, and I highly recommend it to understand some of the earliest roots of a lot of these beliefs, particularly in England and then in the related cultures connected to Old England. Norse and Germanic tend to come up a bit in his work, although he does occasionally also touch on the Irish when they're related to what he's writing about, so highly recommend it. He also does have some material online, some articles relating to the more Scottish material, specifically to Elfshot. Highly recommend that as well. And then we have Between the Living and the Dead by Ava Pox. This is looking slightly at the more Eastern European beliefs, but highly, highly recommend. I really wish that we could get more written in English, or translated into English, I should say, because she does not write in English. Translated into English by this author. Love her work, super insightful for fairy beliefs sort of outside the Western European and Celtic nations area. Really useful material. Not too much by her that's been translated so far that I've been able to find, but definitely highly recommend it. And then my final thing that I'll mention is The Gaelic Otherworld by John Gregerson Campbell. This is actually a combination edition of a couple of his books, which is why it is so gigantic. It has a lot of different stuff in it, but it does include quite a bit of Scottish fairy lore, which makes it really valuable in my opinion. So definitely recommend this one. And finally, Meeting the Other Crowd by Eddie Lenihan and Carolyn Eve Green. This is a collection of stories, Irish material, but I think, even though they're stories and they're not anecdotes or folklore per se, it gives a really valuable insight into that aspect of fairy belief. So this is always one that I recommend to people. And I realize that is a lot of books. I could definitely recommend a lot more. There are quite a few really good books out there at the moment, but that's sort of the bulk of the ones that I would suggest. It's taken me years to get all of these, so I'm certainly not saying run out right now and buy all of these books right at this moment. It's sort of a effort and work to collect them all and then read them all. But these are some of the main ones that I would recommend, or that I do recommend if you're curious. They're quality, they're solid, they have good material in them. They're not going to give you the wrong idea about what fairies are, or misrepresent anything, with the tiny caveat which I mentioned, that fairy faith in Celtic countries, you just have to take that academic material with a grain of salt, and then you'll be fine. So, that's my video for today. I hope you enjoyed all my book references, and in future videos when I'm talking about these books, now you'll know what I'm talking about. Have a nice day.